Now, though it hasn't matched the stacked brilliance of 2023, 2024 has still been one hell of a year for video games, with the year's best and brightest delivering indelible moments that you'll never forget. But what about those moments from the last 12 months that, for better or worse, just left us scratching our heads and wondering quite what we were actually playing? Well, let's have a chat about them, as I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 biggest WTF gaming moments of 2024. Number 10, the random horror mission, Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Now, Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is quite arguably the series' best entry in some old time, but who among us predicted the campaign's totally bonkers mid-game pivot into bloody horror territory? The level Emergence begins with protagonist Case falling down an elevator shaft into an abandoned lab and being exposed to a hallucinogenic gas, at which point you find yourself fighting off fleets of zombies and dealing with mannequins which appear to have come to life. Oh, and to hammer home how decidedly un-Call of Duty this level is, you're also tasked with collecting 4 keycards from different wings of the lab in order to unlock an elevator. Though this glorified zombies mission plonked right into the middle of the campaign did not hit for everyone, it was nothing if not one of the most bizarre and unexpected things to ever happen in any Call of Duty campaign, and to Activision's credit, it's legitimately creepy as hell. Number 9, Ichiban proposes to Psycho, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Despite Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth having you fight bosses such as giant sharks and squids, its most absurd moment comes incredibly early on, when our ever-lovable protagonist Ichiban takes Psycho out on a date and gets in way over his head. Ichiban gets the feeling that the date is going well, and he's not wrong, but he then makes the drastic choice to suddenly propose to Psycho. And not content to stop there, he also launches into an overwrought speech about his willingness to cook, clean and help raise their theoretical kids. Rather than run in the other direction at great speed, as many surely probably would have done, Psycho politely makes an exit, even though it's clear to anyone with eyes or ears that Ichiban's gesture definitely weirded her the hell out. Hilariously, Psycho is then absent from almost the entirety of the game, and even when she reappears at the end, Ichiban blows it a second time by surprising her with a t-shirt that reads "I love Psycho," prompting her to once again slink away. Brutally cringeworthy though it might be, it's all worth it to hear Ichiban's pals utterly roast him each time he screws things up. Number 8, that confusing ending, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Fans couldn't wait to see how Final Fantasy VII Rebirth would end, namely, would Square Enix retain the iconic heartbreaking moment of Aerith's demise at the hands of Sephiroth, or spare her this fate this time around? Well, the answer is both, or neither, or maybe. In an attempt to have their cake and eat it too, or delay committing to one narrative decision altogether, the ending implies that Aerith is saved in one reality, but dies in another. Though the rest of the party mourn Aerith's apparent demise, Cloud is still able to interact with her, yet seemingly unaware that he's the only one who can. This confusing, wishy-washy ending left many fans frustrated that by blurring the lines of reality with multiversal nonsense, the impact of her death was heavily impacted. It was tough to feel much of anything when we weren't even sure that Aerith was genuinely alive or not. Needless to say, the third and apparently concluding chapter in the remake project needs to put in some major work to course-correct this frustrating blunder. Number 7, Concord gets shut down after 2 weeks. While it wasn't remotely surprising that Sony's AAA live service game Concord failed to become a blockbuster hit, did anyone predict it dying off quite so soon? Disastrous opening beta numbers made it clear that players just weren't interested in this hero shooter, and the fact that it was a paid retail release did it no favours at all. All the same, most expected Sony to at least support the game for a few months or maybe half a year before pulling the plug, but instead Sony did something that made the ill-fated Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League seem positively long-lived by comparison. Concord launched to mixed reviews and reportedly sold just 25,000 units in its first week, a devastating outcome for a game that Sony are claimed to have spent $400 million on. And so, Sony waited just 11 days to announce that Concord would be going offline, with all copies of the game being refunded. 2 weeks to the day that it launched, Concord was shuttered, and mere weeks later, Sony confirmed that the game was permanently shut down, with developer Firewalk Studios being closed shortly thereafter. To call this a disaster beyond anyone's imagination doesn't even cut it, and it certainly doesn't bolster much faith in Sony's ongoing push into live service fare. Number 6, the dog ending, Silent Hill 2. Despite developer Bloober Team's spotty track record, they proved all the doubters wrong with their brilliant recent remake of Silent Hill 2, which so perfectly recaptured the atmosphere and groundbreaking narrative of the original survival horror masterpiece. And while many fans questioned whether Bloober might exclude some of the game's weirder elements, like its joke endings, that thankfully was not the case. That is to say that Silent Hill 2's infamous dog ending is back. In which it's revealed that the events of the game were masterminded by Shiba Inu, and it's been lovingly remade in glorious 4K. Well, protagonist James looks absolutely beautiful anyway, but the dog model and background assets of the scene are seemingly intentionally low poly, if only to enhance the strangeness of the bewildering cutscene. And best of all, while the original dog ending had James speak to the dog in Japanese because the game was developed by Team Silent in Japan, in the remake he ends in Polish because of course Bloober Team are based in Poland. It's kind of brilliant really, isn't it? Number 5. Safi is a shapeshifter. Life is Strange Double Exposure. Life is Strange Double Exposure is one of the most polarizing games of the year for many reasons, and not least because of its genuinely unexpected reveal that Max's apparent dead pal Safi is actually a superpowered shapeshifter. It turns out all along that she's been using her abilities to ruin the careers of Gwen and Lucas due to the part they played in the death of her best friend Maya and the cancellation of her own book deal. It's certainly an unexpected twist, albeit one that heavily divided fans, especially with the closer suggesting that she's now off to seek out other superpowered folk like herself in order to build up a team. After all, has Life is Strange ever really been about Avengers-esque squads of superpowered individuals? No, and it's a bizarre implication for the future of a franchise that has always put personal drama ahead of the supernatural. Number 4. Varam's heel turn. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Some might consider it a WTF moment that a Prince of Persia flavoured Metroidvania ended up being one of the best games in the series, but the story also had a nifty sleight of hand up its sleeve as well. Protagonist Sargon is a member of the warrior clan known as the Immortals, and at the start of the game is tasked with helping rescue the kidnapped Prince Ghassan. However, it's soon revealed that the leader of your team, Varam, is actually a turncoat, at which point he stabs Ghassan to death with a sword, planning to take the throne for himself. Killing off the actual prince from the game's title in the opening act is certainly, well, a new trick for this franchise, and if players weren't shaken enough yet, you're then thrust straight into a boss fight with Varam, who summarily kicks your ass numerous times with his nifty timey-wimey powers before then leaving you for dead. It's certainly one hell of a way to ensure that players really want to take him down later on. Number 3. The Water Fetch Quest. Indika. The wildly overlooked Indika is one of the most peculiar and fascinating games of the year, revolving around the titular nun as she gets used to her utter boredom of life in a monastery. This drudgery is also passed onto the player in the early going as well, where they're tasked with fetching water from a well and pouring it into a barrel 5 times. Now each round takes an excruciatingly long time, unaided by Indika's intentionally slow movement speed, and so you'll spend around 10 minutes completing this maddeningly dull chore, but it gets even worse from there. Even once the deed is done, it's followed up by a cutscene where Mother Superior arrives and immediately tips the barrel over, ensuring all that effort was for nothing. In terms of the game design, it's extremely clever, ensuring that we as players immediately identify with the tedium of her life at the convent, which basically feels like a parody of unimaginative fetch quest padding in video games. Number 2. Batman's Death. Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League. Even though the game straight up tells you what's going to happen in its title, Batman's brutal demise in Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League still touched one hell of a nerve with the fanbase. A little while after the boss battle against the Dark Knight, a cutscene shows Harley Quinn executing him with a swift gunshot to the head, a moment that sent shockwaves through the entire DC fandom. Some were simply shocked that Batman died in such unceremonious, unglorified fashion, while others were upset at the very notion of Batman dying at all. Given that this is the very same Batman from the beloved Arkham games, many simply took umbrage with him being killed off. And then there's the fact that Kill the Justice League was the final DC game to feature voice work from the late great Kevin Conroy, and some saw it as disrespectful to his memory for Batman to die in one of Conroy's final outings. It's certainly a death scene that got people talking, for better or worse, and it is at least one of the few memorably provocative moments in an otherwise mostly forgettable experience. And number 1, the ending song, Thank Goodness You're Here. In addition to being one of the most criminally underappreciated games of the year, Thank Goodness You're Here also touts one of the most memorably, hilariously weird endings of any video game pretty much ever. After spending the game helping the residents of Barnsworth deal with their many issues, ramping up from the mundane to the hilariously deranged, it ends with an infectiously catchy musical montage of the exhausted protagonist being asked to perform more and more soul-sucking tasks without gratitude. Better yet, the sequence is interactive, with players having to press context buttons in time with the music in order to carry out the requested tasks. But the real beauty of this gloriously unhinged climax is the brilliantly witty lyrics and top-tier voice acting, at once delivering a colossal earworm of a closing tune and encapsulating the entire concept of the game, that this poor idiot is doing all this hard work without any thanks to show for it. Wicked.